Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Michael Gnade, an entrepreneur and owner of Manor Games. Manor is the publisher of Maximum Apocalypse, Set a Watch, and Brass Empire. Their latest title, Seas of Havoc, is currently on Kickstarter. Mike, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is great to have you. Anytime I can talk to a publisher that's got a catalog, right, like you guys have, it's always a treat, quite frankly, because we can get kind of into the woods and go a little deep on not only just, the recent title, but kind of talk about some of that journey of how you kind of got up to being the status of being an actual publisher, cooperating with other developers, designers, and quite frankly, even publishing other people's games. Is kind of, I think, where a lot of people in the industry, ideally want to get to at some point. How long have you been doing this for?
That is a good question. I know that I launched the Maximum Apocalypse Kickstarter, which was our second game.
Yeah.
When my second daughter was born. So she's about to turn 5.
Okay.
So I would say I started 7 years ago because, I had to design. I don't remember how long it took me to design Brass Empire, but about 7 years ago, Brass Empire is probably on Kickstarter or in some process of being out. I know I spent a year before Maximum Apocalypse was on Kickstarter, sort of going to all the conventions and playtesting it.
Sure.
Sort of get the very guerrilla marketing style to get the word out, for that game.
It actually surprised me. I would have assumed it would have been longer, just given how much you've done in that period of time. It's quite amazing. I was looking across your Kickstarter. I think you've done like 14 Kickstarter. I mean, you've done a lot of Kickstarters, right? And very successful. Like, it's not like you've just done like a couple that have been successful. Like, almost all of them are very successful. And when you total that amount up, I think it was something like $1.8 million. And that's without even getting into like add-ons with the pledge manager and, the additional funds that come in, kind of after the campaign. That's just purely on Kickstarter during the initial kind of funding. That's quite amazing. Is this something that you kind of envisioned when you first started? Was this kind of the end goal, or have you kind of worked your way into this?
Definitely not. So it started, Brass Empire just started as a personal project, side hustle game that I was working on for myself. And it was one of those things like I can go around and try to pitch it to publishers for years and hope that someone makes it, or I can just sort of work on it over time by myself and, hire an artist, do little things here and there. So that's what I did. And I got it to a point where, it's playable and looked pretty good. And I actually got invited or approved to be for PAX Prime. They had an indie mega booth. They had this analog game section.
Oh, cool.
Where during the main expo, indie mega booth used to buy up a big section of the main expo hall and put a bunch of indie video games in there.
Yep.
And I was sort of familiar. I covered indie video games, when I was in my 20s and stuff. So I was aware of them and was friendly with a lot of them. I had volunteered with them in the past. So I knew about the submission process. And when they opened it up to board games, I was like, hey, I'm working on a board game. Why don't I just submit it and see what happens? And I was accepted. So I basically got a free. I had to pay for, travel and hotel and stuff, but relatively affordable compared to what it would normally be for someone. And I got to have a little round table that could sit about 2 or 3 people in the expo hall of PAX Prime. And I had Brass Empire with me, and I just played it a bunch with people who were interested walking by. And I followed that up. PAX Prime is in like August, I think, typically end of August. And I followed that up with my first Kickstarter in September after that. And it was just, I had a full-time job. I was in computer and IT consulting. And I just sort of did that on the side. And then, it funded. So I had enough money to produce it and ship it. And then, made a little money on the side, basically.
I often find like when you see these like prototype nights, right? Or in a case like this, when you're actually at a convention, there's almost like that little trigger that goes off when you're playing with people, and all of a sudden you start looking around the table and you see people enjoying themselves, right? And now it's outside of, hey, I'm trying to get these people to play this game, but these people are playing a game and I'm watching them play. And it's almost like from other people I've talked to, it's like a little spark that goes off that says, I think I have something here, right? This is a special moment. Is that how it felt with when you're at this PAX and you're going through this, or was it still kind of?
It was definitely validating.
Yeah,
To know that not only were you picked to be one of the tabletop games that they featured and showcased, but also, when you're getting people, primarily video gamers, a lot of times to sit down and teach a game, I think it helped that Brass Empire, being a deck builder, was
yeah,
pretty accessible and a faster game than some of the stuff we've done since then. So I
yeah.
think that was actually an advantage back then. You could sit and play almost a full game probably in 30 minutes.
No, that's great.
Oh, once you get past like the rules explanation and stuff, and there are ways to shorten the game too. So you could just sort of make the point pool a little smaller and let people play through it and hopefully leave them wanting a little bit more. But yeah, it was just validating. I mean, it's also fun being around creative game designer, developer type people. And it was just a stepping stone. It was just one of those things. Like it was a side hustle. And then when Brass Empire, I had physical copies. You do a Kickstarter, you have a couple extra 100 copies to sell. I just started going to conventions locally when I could.
Oh wow.
I met some great people, as part of the tabletop co-op group, which is a bunch of other like small
Yep.
designers and independent publishers who get together to buy up space, but it's tabletop focused. So, there's like a handful of us. So the following year, when PAX Prime rolled around again, they rented out like a little conference room on that second level going up to the exhibition hall. And all of us were in there together. And we're all in the same place, bouncing ideas off of each other.
Yeah.
And that's when I had a playable prototype of Maximum Apocalypse. And when people would sort of wander into the room, they didn't know exactly what it was. And you'd get people who were super interested in the games. And I'd be like, oh, you want to try something new? And I would use it as a playtesting space for Maximum Apocalypse. And then when I put that Kickstarter up, it was literally just, I'm going to put this Kickstarter up. I was in the process of selling my IT business, and my second daughter was on the way, and my wife was switching careers. So I was going to sort of be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
And then Maximum Apocalypse did 6 figures very organically. Like if you look at that campaign, it was like a slow start. And then
just boom.
People just it had this like very organic sort of, I mean, I hate to use the term viral, but I mean, it's sort of what it was, where there was something about it where our conversion rate on Kickstarter, like when people saw it, it was just converting very high. And I don't think I've ever had a campaign like that had such a steep exponential end to it. Typically you have sort of like a U on Kickstarter where you have a great first week and then it sort of tails off in the middle. You've got the mid-campaign slump and then it ratchets up at the end. But Maximum Apocalypse was like, just a straight up, curve near the end. And that's how we broke 100,000. I mean, it's strictly because people started coming in, seeing it, they were interested. We unlocked stretch goals, which were fueling excitement, which, just skyrocketed things.
And sometimes I think timing can come into play too, right? So from a genre standpoint, I think that was kind of when we're getting to the peak of The Walking Dead and so forth as well, I would think, right? So when you have this post-apocalyptic world, I think sometimes, right place, right time, right hook, artwork is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I love the artwork for Maximum Apocalypse, and it's something I'm trying to keep it as a touchstone for like, Rock Manor Games as a mission and a brand. I'm trying to keep that sort of comic graphic novel piece of it at heart. In the future, at least, it's something I really like and want to lean into. But yeah, I think the look of it, the art pulled people in, all sorts of factors. You never really know.
Yeah.
But at that point, when I did 6 figures, it was sort of like, well, it's going to be a stay-at-home dad, which I'll do, but I'll just sort of do that and do this part-time, on the side, because it was sort of low pressure. I was sort of figuring out what I was going to do next. So, and it was just one of those things. It snowballed, right? I keep working on things. You keep going to conventions. You keep networking and meeting new people. And I've just continued to have games and hopefully done a good job fulfilling Kickstarters, and people are enjoying those games. And it just sort of, when you build up that catalog, things become easier. Certainly. I'm certainly glad that I started when I did, and I'm not starting now. I think it's obviously the longer you're doing it, the barriers, the easier it is, and
Yeah.
the more, I think there are more barriers to entry now. Well, I guess they're not barriers to entry. I mean, Kickstarter makes it easy, right? But the money that's come to Kickstarter and the professionalism and everything else is very different now than it was when I started.
Certainly, standing out is much more difficult without pumping in marketing dollars, right? Which,
Exactly
as
right.
you're saying, right, like it's just most of the successful campaigns now have a good marketing budget, right? And I
Definitely.
think that although the industry itself has gotten a lot larger, right? So there's way more content creators now than there was 7 years ago. Way more games coming out on Kickstarter on a weekly basis than there was 7 years ago. But that's also the problem. There's way more games coming out at the same time. So the field is very crowded. I think for me, I think it's a lot like the beverage industry, right? It's like beer. There's a beer for everyone, right? So although there's all these indie breweries all around, they all seem to do somewhat okay because they're satisfying someone's needs, right? And I see the board game industry the same. So I don't want to discourage people from entering the industry because I think that there's a lot of ideas that are yet to come that are going to add a lot to this industry, and I think get even more people excited about it. But at the same time, coming into the industry now, there's a lot more homework I think you need to do than maybe 10 years ago when people are kind of figuring it as they go. Well, a lot of this stuff's been figured out now, and there's some pretty established models on how to go to market on these games that if you're not aware of them, it can be hurdles for you to have to leap over, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't discourage people from trying either
Yeah.
if it's something they're passionate about. I would just say that I think one of the things people don't think about, and I mean, I'm talking about myself here too, because I
Yeah.
honestly didn't do that research or homework to even think about it. But I mean, when I was first working on Brass Empire, it did not cross my mind to approach a publisher and pitch a publisher when I should have. I didn't even think about a publisher until I had already invested in art and had like a good looking product and was like, had a small little Kickstarter and was hoping to sell extra copies.
Yeah.
And the reality is in the industry, you should be pitching to a publisher like when you have a solid game concept, way before there's art. Maybe you have a theme in mind or but you have a solid game and a prototype to show people
Mm-hmm.
because publishers want to take that game and they want to use their artists and they want to polish it and develop it, and make it their own. I mean, I'm the same now as a publisher. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But that's something I had no idea about, when I first started. And I think if I had, I think I would have potentially considered not doing a Kickstarter and pitching to a publisher as well. I think you need to sort of figure out where your strengths are and what works best for you.
And also try to figure out what do you want to learn versus what you have no interest in, right? Because there's some
Yeah,
people that may
like,
actually want to learn, A to Z on how to do
oh yeah,
that, and that's
I
totally
mean,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. But if you're a pure game designer, I would definitely encourage you to just pitch to publishers because if you're not interested in like
Business.
marketing and sending out newsletters and
Yeah.
writing newsletters and writing ad copy and figuring out Facebook ads and doing Google Analytics and building websites, like there's so many things that are not about making and developing games
Yeah.
that are part of the job that are not my favorite things to do. But, I've had the history and sort of lucky enough to have some of those skill sets that have helped me along the way.
Yeah. And then, so how did you meet the designers behind Seas of Havoc?
So Seas of Havoc is a pretty interesting story because they've had a long journey to get to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I think the original game was conceived in 2013. One of the designers, Peter, was a teacher of game design at a school, and Sebastian was his student, and Seas of Havoc was an assignment.
Oh, that's cool.
And after the assignment, Peter offered to sort of mentor people who were interested in pursuing the games that they had designed further, because it's an assignment you're only going to spend so much time on, in a what's a semester of college, a couple months, and games
Yeah.
take like years potentially. And Peter and Sebastian linked up and kept working on the game. They got some recognition and won some awards in 2016. They won the Canadian Game Design Award for their game was called Sloops at the time. So
Okay.
one of the few contributions of me to Seas of Havoc is that I said we need a new name because I don't know what a sloop is. Of course, Sebastian's a big naval guy, like nautical guy. So he's like, "Oh, the sloop's a type of ship," blah blah blah. And I was like, I had no idea that was the type of ship.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, they won these awards, and then I think life sort of took them in different places, and it went on the back burner for a while when publishing deal didn't come through, and the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
and I actually met them. So we have a convention sort of close to me. It's down in Baltimore, which is about an hour and a half away from where I am in the Philadelphia area, called Unpub, where it's a convention for you to, as a game designer, you can bring an unpublished game and playtest it, or as a publisher, you can go and play a bunch of games that don't have publishers, that are literally like, very rough prototypes with note cards and papers and different stages of development, and playtest games. And it's open to the public too. So it's great for designers who want to not only potentially find a publisher, but also just get a bunch of playtesting in. And it's relatively affordable for publishers and designers. So I've been, as a designer, I've been there as a publisher, I've been there doing both things, where I'm playtesting games I'm working on, and in my spare time looking at playing in other games and helping other game designers playtest their games and looking for things that interest me. So that was obviously canceled because of COVID. And in its place, they had something called NunPub, which was a digital version of it, where they got a bunch of publishers together and a bunch of designers, and it was basically a speed dating event where we met online via Zoom, or I think it was Zoom or something. I think it was Zoom, but then we were on like Tabletop Simulator.
Okay. Yeah.
And the host would punch us into a different room every like 15 minutes or something. So it was like,
This is like a Discord. Was it like a video Discord server or something?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Basically we just had to jump.
Yeah.
Basically, we'd go back to like a lobby.
Yeah.
We'd go back to like a lobby, and the organizer would say, "Okay, you're going to this room," and you go to that room, and you'd meet with the person, digitally this way. And they would have everything set up, which is nice, because in between, as we're moving around, everyone can sort of reset their Tabletop Simulator mod or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're staying in the same mod. So that's how I met them. Peter and Sebastian were able to go to this convention and log in digitally, and I basically did this NunPub and played a bunch of games. I don't remember how many it was. Definitely over 10, maybe as close to 20. I looked through all the pitch sheets, and I never know immediately. Like, it wasn't like I played the game immediately. It was like, oh, this game's definitely great, I'm signing it. But the way it sort of works for me is I sort of take a couple days to like let everything stew in my head.
Yeah.
And I come back and say, I go through all the sell sheets and I say, which ones do I remember? What games do I remember like being interested in or enjoying, based on the pitch? And I tried to follow up with those people and play a full game. Because during the pitch, you're just sort of hearing it, maybe seeing a turn. You don't have time to play a full game. So Sloops was one of the games that stuck with me. And I circled back around to them and scheduled a time to play and talk to the guys. And they were fun and great to work with. So I reached out to sign the game. And I don't even remember if I was the only one the only publisher who was interested or not. But, for whatever reason, they decided on me. I also signed Merchants of Magic during that same convention. Okay. So ironically, I've been to all these in-person events where I've signed maybe one game, sometimes zero. And this digital version is the only one I've ever signed 2 games from one like speed dating thing.
Yeah.
So I also signed Merchants of Magic during that event as well.
I think you're probably happy with that you did sign this one, because you're at 126,000. I'll put in Canadian dollars. It always sounds bigger, but 126,000 on a $35,000 goal. So smashed the goal. 1,350 backers. Still got 21 days to go. The back end 72-hour hockey stick is going to kick in. This is going to be a very, very successful title for you, and you must just be tickled at how this turned out. Can you walk people through kind of the essence of how to play this game? Like, for me, I got immediately a sense of one of my favorite games growing up, which was Sid Meier's Pirates, right, with the Super Nintendo. And I was telling you just before we went on air that I even still have it on my Xbox, right? Because I just love the game, where you have this sense where you're attacking, especially the ship battle mode is dynamic, but it's not too complicated, so you can have fun. You can, kind of turn your ship sideways so you can get your cannons kind of point at the enemy and so forth. So I got a lot of those kind of vibes when I was going through the videos and so forth on this. Is that fair, or would you say that's an unfair way to describe it?
It's been a while since I've played the video game of Sid Meier's Pirates, but it sounds pretty accurate. Yeah. I mean, the thing that grabbed me about the game originally, when it was just sloops, is you all were the same ship, you all have the same starting deck. But I love this idea. You have a grid. It's a grid-based sea, and it's the age of sail, so your cannons don't shoot forward and backward; they shoot out the sides of your ship. And the way they had the cards designed, where you could just sort of intuitively see how the ship moves, I thought was really interesting and very also intuitive to play. It's like you play a card and you sort of like look at the drawing and move your ship that way. And you have a couple options, but you can sort of see on the art where your ship's going to end up. And you're looking at the grid and you're saying, well, I want to go right in front of that person and turn, so I'm facing him this way and I can blast them, and you can sort of see it visually. So I love that tactical nature of it. I also tend to favor interactivity in games versus, more solo play where we're just competing for a score against other players. So I'm saying from a personal standpoint, I do like more interactivity.
It's a little bit of that.
I'm not opposed to take that. The funny thing about this game is people think, it's a naval skirmish game, no question.
Yeah.
But and you're certainly shooting people. But as one of my designer friends said when he played it at Unpub, like everyone's getting shot. So it's not like other take that games that are like Euro-y inspired, where you feel like your engine's getting slowed down, you're just getting picked on. Like everyone's going to take damage cards, and it equals out pretty well. So it's just sort of like you're all getting points shooting each other, and there's no like bad feelings about it. So it is take that, but the only way you're going to take that more is if you sort of move poorly and set yourself up as an easy target, for other people. To get shot at. But I think there's an incentive for players to take out the top person, because you're seeing the score and you obviously want to get more points, but you want to shoot the person in the lead because it will slow them down. You don't want to go after the person in last place. It doesn't make sense. Can
you completely eliminate somebody from the game, or is it
there's absolutely no player elimination. So you're just competing for infamy. Your ship never gets destroyed. And the damage cards you get that slow your engine down, every time they come up in your hand and clog your hand up, when you play them, they're actually removed from your deck.
Okay.
So it's a very minor slowdown. It's like a turn, maybe.
Yeah. And you can upgrade your ship as well, right?
Yeah. And you're always using, before you go to the sea phase in battle, there's this worker placement phase where you can always draw more cards, take the flag that draws more cards to make up for having damage cards in your hand, or buy new cards. Because when you deck build and you buy a card, it doesn't go to your deck, it goes immediately to your hand, effectively giving you an extra turn during that sea phase.
Yeah.
Because you play a card on your turn in the sea phase. So one of my favorite things to do in the game is have high card draw. Let everyone maneuver all their ships. Because sometimes you can move to set up a shot, and it's the other person's turn. They move out of your way.
Yeah.
Then you move again and try to set it up. So what I love doing is waiting till everyone runs out of turns, saving my last few cards that are really packing a punch at the end, and being like, oh, you're out of cards? Well, I'm going to move right in front of you. You can't move. Oh, you pass because you're out of cards? Great. I'm going to shoot you again, and shoot you again. So you can definitely set things up like that, which I think is so great. There's also ways to set yourself up for back-to-back turns in the middle of it. Yeah. So I love the strategy for that, and find it very engaging the whole time I play.
And you have these different captains, right? So is it, when you start off, like, does everybody start with the exact same skill set, or is there a little bit of differential between the different captain skill sets and so forth?
So there's a ton of differential. I would say that's the only thing I really stressed in development. After I signed it, like I said, there were no ship captains. Everyone had the same starting deck, and everyone was just a ship.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense to develop the game that way. You want to have it balanced, right? You want to make sure everyone's the same to make sure the game's balanced. But they've been working on it so long, and I knew it was very balanced already. I thought, guys, we got to mix this up. I want to feel like I'm a captain. I want to feel like I've got a particular ship. So my big stress, and I would say my only contribution to the gameplay, honestly, was the fact that I wanted captains to be a thing, to have some like ability cards. I wanted to be a captain with some abilities, so I just felt like I was somebody, and I wasn't just a ship. And then I urged them to make the ships asymmetrical, and they both took it and run with it, which is great. So yeah, you pick your ship. Each ship has its own upgrades and its own unique set of starting cards. I think there's 6 of them. And then you mix that together with your captain, who has a passive power that's always up. And they have 2 ability cards that get shuffled into your deck. So you have a starting deck of 8 cards. And you can mix and match them however you want. We have some suggestions to start with. but you're free to do whatever you want and make up your own combinations. And obviously, you're going to continue to build that deck as you play. So the options and the asymmetry is pretty limitless, which I think just lends itself to great replayability.
With the deluxe edition, there's this little chest image I saw on your page. Is that something you get as part of the deluxe edition? Do you actually get that little chest?
Yeah. In parentheses, assembly is required. So
Okay.
what it will be is in the box, it'll be like a sheet of plywood.
Yep.
So have you ever gotten any of those like plywood inserts before, those organizers that are a board game accessory? We're using the same type of thing. So we're doing like a sheet of plywood that'll be flat in the box, sort of as a nicer punch board. You'll punch out all the pieces and there'll be a little instruction sheet, and you'll assemble. You can assemble the wooden, it'll be laser cut, and you'll be able to assemble the treasure chest. You can paint it, you can stain it, you can do whatever you want to it. But what's cool about doing it this way is it actually has a hinge, so it opens up.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
The idea is you can store your components. You can store your metal coins in there, and you can store your cannonballs in there, which are 2 of the 3 resources in the game. So it'll be a very thematic storage solution that you can open up, and everyone can grab out of the treasure chest when they can get their things.
The $1 million question is, will it fit in the box after it's assembled?
It will. So I would encourage everyone to watch the Kickstarter, because we're doing sort of daily unlocks, no stretch goals, but there'll be some more fun things around that in the future, and I think everyone's questions will be answered. But yeah, the short answer is yes.
Oh, that's
the
brilliant.
box is high enough. I actually have it nearby, but I'll have to I won't bother grabbing it.
No,
but it's about it's about the size of sort of like a deck of cards standing up straight. So we've made the box deep enough to hold it. So you'll have your cards. Your cards should be able to fit, what do you call that? Like horizontally along vertically, in the box. Yeah, vertically. And then the chest will sit a little higher, but we made the box deep enough that it can fully close with the treasure chest in there.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's one thing that drives me nuts about sometimes when you get things that come with games as like add-ons, and it's cool, but then when you go to put the game away and it doesn't fit in the box, it's like, do I have to
I would also say
every time?
Anybody who saw the prototype I had the treasure chest with me, or I had the prototype treasure chest that I built myself with hot glue at PAX Unplugged. And even in the prototype box, you could close it and put the boxes in there.
Yeah, looks
even
cool.
with like, obviously a bunch of stuff's going to change since the prototype gets printed. But even in that one, the box was big enough to hold the treasure chest.
So, as a publisher, I know that you have, reached this level where you're not only doing your own games, you're doing other people's games. What's the next step? Or is there more of your own designs coming, or are you exclusively focused on publishing other people's games, or kind of what's next after Seas of Havoc?
So to answer the question broadly about, I still am pursuing my own designs, and I'm definitely looking at ways where I can get back more to that. That's definitely my favorite part. Game design and game development are definitely my 2 favorite things to do. Whether it's designing my own games or developing other people's games, that's the part of the job I definitely enjoy the most. So I'm definitely looking at ways I can dedicate more time to that. But as far as specifically what's coming up for Rock Manor Games, Lawyer Up, our asymmetrical courtroom drama game, where one player plays the prosecution and one player plays the defense.
Oh, that's awesome.
We had a Kickstarter for that sometime during the pandemic time warp. It's been fulfilled. The game's in stores. At least the base game is. The expansions are sold out.
Yeah.
But we're looking at doing season 2 of that. So we've got 3 new cases for that coming out. A divorce case where you fight over marital assets.
Okay.
And, the dog, the cat, the kids, the house.
The truck.
It's a celebrity divorce. So we don't want it to hit too close to home for anybody. So it's like a rich and famous divorce.
Yeah.
We also have a private investigator, private eye case that'll be part of season 2, where you're framed for a murder that you didn't commit, and you're trying to split your time between defending yourself in the courtroom and investigating and finding out who the true murderer is outside of the courtroom.
Oh, that's cool.
So that'll be a case. And then we have a 1980s casino heist case where a bunch of con men have gotten together and somehow, we think they've stolen a bunch of money from the casino, but you're going out to prove that. And a lot of them are con men, so you don't know if who you're putting on the stand is actually conning you, and ratting for you, whether you're the prosecution or defense, or playing you for some long con. So that's sort of the theme of that, and we'll sort of have a 1980s Vice City vibe to it. So those 3 new cases will be coming probably sometime in the spring.
Okay.
To a crowdfunding platform, to GameFound.
Oh wow.
And then we're going to have our Maximum Apocalypse RPG is going to get a supplemental book, a self-contained. We're doing A Few in Curse, which is an independent comic that we've done a board game for, and I know the creator. Become friends with the creator, so we're doing a RPG supplement to the Maximum Apocalypse RPG that's self-contained based on the Few in Curse universe, which is sort of a Wild West post-apocalyptic world where all the water is evaporated from Earth. So if you're into RPGs, we'll have that probably sometime over the summer. And then in the fall, we're going to have a game from Todd Walsh, whether it's going to be his sci-fi game he's working on or the next Set a Watch. That is sort of yet to be determined. We're sort of developing both currently. And I'm pretty much leaving it up to him what he feels is ready first. But I know he's looking forward to going to Unpub this spring to sort of put both games through the ringer as far as playtesting goes, sort of figure out which one he's more confident in as far as which one he wants to release first. But those will be coming close together.
Wow.
So we'll probably do one in the fall of this year and one this time next year or something. There'll be a couple Todd Walsh games hitting. Certainly around that time frame.
So you almost have something going every quarter.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
I've realized that's sort of my maximum threshold, at least currently, for what I can put out consistently and of the quality I want. When I've tried to, and the other thing about that rule is if I do things quarterly, I can't do 4 new games quarterly. I can do 2 new games and 2 expansions specifically.
Yeah.
Because expansions, the game, right? So it's easier to create new content for a system that it can't change versus a new game, which is like the possibilities are endless until the game comes out, right? Like you can do whatever you want to a new game. So I've discovered that my bandwidth is sort of 2 new games and 2 expansions a year.
Wow. Well, gosh, I mean, it's crazy to see how much you've literally got going on at any given time. It's clear it's a passion, right? And I think that probably makes it a lot easier when you're passionate about it, right? It's not a job. It's literally something that you love. So, and I think that comes through in what we can see in the materials you've put out thus far. I want to wish you all the best this coming year. Man, this campaign is, you guys are crushing it. And it's going to be interesting to see where it finally lands. But I know already you're happy and you're going to be ecstatic, I'm sure, where it finally finishes off. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really happy with Seas of Havoc. And for those listening, it'll be on Kickstarter till the 25th of February. So if you like piratey games with worker placement and deck building, check it out. Back it. You can back it for $2 and make a decision on whether you want it once everything's been revealed at the end too.
That's a good point too. I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody that wants to find it. It's just easy that way. Either type in Seas of Havoc on Kickstarter or just in our show notes, there's a link where you can just click. It'll take you right to the page. Mike, all the best. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.